Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
So are you originally from Mobile?
I was born in Mobile. My early years were in Baldwin County. And
Okay.
then my parents moved around a bit. I ended up in Atlanta. But my grandfather was a row crop farmer in Baldwin County, and which is just across the bay from Mobile. And so I spent a lot of time hauling bags of soybeans to put in planters and pulling weeds off plow heads and cultivators. And yeah, I spent a lot of time there, but I didn't live there full time after I left as a child.
I grew up on like 5 different types of farms. So
Yeah,
I like to joke about how I definitely was raised in a barn. So
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. And he didn't have cattle. One of my uncles later on had one went into dairy farming and one went into, he was a row cropper, but they had moved to Louisiana. And so when they went into row cropping, then one left row cropping to go into dairying, and then he ended up picking up a fair head of cattle that he raised. But my grandfather he always kept a couple of beef cows around for slaughter, and one for milk because my grandmother still made butter, and so they had that, but it was almost entirely a row crop farm.
sounds very normal. One of ours was an ostrich farm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't do
Yeah.
that.
And then we had
Yeah.
another that it was like a zoo. He had lots of llamas and ferrets and parrots.
Yeah.
He adopted parrots that came from individuals who had passed away and they didn't have anything
Mm-hmm.
else to do with the
Mm.
bird. So,
That's a noble thing.
yeah, well, he was a very interesting and noble guy for sure. But he's since passed. But uh
And who was that?
it
Which
was
which family member?
this was my uncle.
Okay.
This was my uncle. The ostrich farm was a different uncle. And then my
Okay.
grandfather had a horse farm. And then my other grandparents were farm hands. So we traveled around Tennessee from farm to farm, vaccinating cow, putting up fencing,
Mm-hmm.
just, whatever
Mm-hmm.
needed to be done to those that time. But yeah, the parrots were super cool because like one spoke Spanish and only Spanish, and then one only whistled TV show uh, theme
Themes.
songs. Yep. And
Yeah.
then one
Yeah.
cussed a
So you
lot.
got the Rockford Files, you got the Love Boat, you got
Yeah.
all those TV show themes.
Yeah. It was super cool. But people don't realize how recent the transition to a technological world really has been,
Oh
considering
yeah.
that, you know, I guess if you come from like highly populated areas, it kind of feels like the world's been always a little bit more advanced rather than boondock country. And
Yeah.
coming from Alabama, it's just fields mostly where people joke about how we're 50 years behind everybody else, but they don't realize how true that is.
Yeah.
It really gives you a completely, which, the US is so large, it's basically a completely different country in every little region that you go to.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Almost every state is completely different.
Hmm.
Or at least there are similarities across borders only because the line was drawn there, but the geography and kind of the culture of the land, like, the very northern part of Alabama, the very southern part of Western Tennessee, the western part of Alabama, the eastern part of Mississippi, kind of the same thing with the eastern part of Alabama, Georgia. It's all got like there's these cultural areas that are divided by a state line, but there's a lot of similarities across that. It's more like a little area. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like the five boroughs, you know. You go in New York, you go to a different borough, and you might as well be in a different town, a different city, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
but
lot
it's
of
you know
beauty
it's.
everywhere.
I tell people a lot of times, you know, they'll say, you know, how are you doing on this, you know, with some thing that I've dealt with, and I tell them, I'm like, look, um, my ancestors 2 generations ago, nobody had toilet paper. The women didn't have tampons. They didn't have a bathroom in the house.
No running water.
You know,
My dad
like,
remembers no running water in his grandparents' house.
yeah, right.
No
And
toilet.
so I'm like,
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to chumbacasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to chumbacasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
they were fairly tough people. They didn't have time to have the problems that I have, you know. I
Exactly.
mean, people lived, they died, they moved on. And so, in a certain sense, you know, the complexities of today's age add a lot more complexity, if that makes sense, right? Or they add a lot more complicatedness, I guess I'd say. Whereas, you know, they were much more focused on. It's funny, you know, my son likes to say a blessing before a family meal. And but it's a I mean it's a way of him saying gratitude, you know, having gratitude. But my grandparents, when they said the blessing, when my parents blessed a meal, it was because they were super thankful to have food that day. Right.
Yeah.
Like it was a different level of gratitude, right? Like
Yeah.
they knew what it was like to not have food on a day. So when they had food that day, they're very grateful for that, you know. And yeah, I think we've got a lot in exchange over the decades, but we've traded a lot for what we've gained, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you lose
Yeah,
sight of the things that were super important then, which are super important now also. But
they are.
like relationships and building the family and having the gratitude for what you do have because you could very easily not have. And we've become so comfortable in our, consumeristic society where not all of us for sure, but for the most part, everybody has their basic needs met.
Yeah.
And, are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Okay,
Hmm.
so, for centuries, that bottom level was nobody could escape it. Most people couldn't
Hmm.
escape it. They were every single day running themselves in the ground just for their food, water, shelter, and most of the time couldn't make ends meet for days at a time. And so now, for the most part, we've kind of stabilized that out, and we're able to move through the other levels as a society and a people and a culture because, the microcosm is the macrocosm and vice versa. So that's why healing the individual helps to heal the community and heal the family unit and heal everything that that individual touches. And healing's messy. We're dealing, while we were stuck on the bottom level of Maslow's pyramid, we were accumulating a lot of trauma that we didn't have the time or opportunity to really process. Plus, who knew how to? Nobody knows how to. So that's why we get all of those cliches of like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and figure it out. But anyway, we could go on a tangent about that for decades, I promise. I can talk. But tell us about your struggles and what you've been dealing with.
Well, I think it's a good segue actually, because
Good.
I think what there was some point in my life where things were uh, one of my core beliefs is no one outruns the universe.
Hmm.
And it will kind of eventually, you will just kind of get to a place where you have to make decisions. You have to confront things. You have to face them. You know, I mean, I guess some people die before that happens. Some people die because it happens, but you will come to that place. And I was at a place one time where I decided, like, what purpose do I have? What do I have? And as I thought about a number of the challenges I'd had earlier in life, this was probably in my 20s, um, maybe late 20s, but late 20s, early 30s, I'd say somewhere in that range. I had looked I'd looked at my ancestors in two ways. One is I have three words tattooed on each arm. And to me, they build one upon another, one upon another. They kind of tell the story of my ancestors that I could look back on, people who had been through those very foundational hard times and survived and worked each generation to make each generation better. And those words were, and again, one word kind of leads to the next and the next. And so it's honor, courage, determination, perseverance, wisdom, and finally success. So I looked back and I tried to say, well, look, I'm kind of a visual person, so I have to see a picture and then I have to take that picture and it's like a meta phrase. So it's like for like everything in that picture, I have a little phrase that describes everything that I saw. And that's how those six words eventually from on my arms so that I could see them all the time and remind myself when things got difficult, ask yourself the question, did you start with an honorable intent, an honorable position? Because that should give you courage when things get difficult. And if you show courage over and over again, that basically is what people call determination. And if you are determined for long enough, then you will have persevered. And my grandfather used to say, experience is what you get just after you needed it. And so wisdom tends to come after perseverance, right? If you persevere long enough, then you figured out from all your experiences what you screwed up, and you're like, now I'm wiser than I was. But then when people say that, that's the thing, like in the Old Testament, the angel comes to Solomon, and he's like, in honor of your father David, I'm gonna give you, God's gonna give you what you want. So what do you want? And he says, well, what I want is wisdom, because if I have wisdom, I have everything else. And boom, Solomon becomes the wisest man, to ever live. So I thought at some point, I was like, that's what I'll do. If that's wise, and I want to be wise, I'll pray that prayer. Now, what they left out of that story was, um, I'm saying this without profanity, but they left out all the poo
Profanity's
that
okay.
would, okay, they left out all the shit you got to go through to get that wisdom, right? Like they just left all that out of that story. And maybe it was
Right.
left out for Solomon. I don't know, but it's not for everybody else,
Yeah.
right? And so, and then the last was if you had wisdom, you were more likely to achieve success, whatever that was. Probably not money, but some success in your life overall. Um, and so at that point, I decided kind of that the other side of that coin was I really felt like someone in our family was going to have to put, and our family had kind of shrunken in size over the generations, which I think has happened to a lot of families.
Hmm.
Um, went from very large families to basically it was me and my wife and four children, now three. And if they have fewer children, which is kind of the trend, then it'll be, it just kind of keeps getting smaller. Um, but I looked back and I said, well, how far back did this go? My great great grandfather was I did not know him, but from all accounts, he was extremely kind to my father, who would have been his grandchild, but he was terribly difficult and a very hard disciplinarian on my grandfather.
Hmm.
My grandfather, who most likely had a mental illness, because he was, you know, in the pejorative sense, he was crazy. Okay. Like I mean, he drank to no end. He would fight anything. He shot people. He would definitely be in prison today. Okay. Like there's no doubt he'd be in prison. Back then, it was just kind of like you were out in the
Normal.
backwoods of Alabama. So,
Yeah.
stay away from Jim. He's kind of crazy.
Yep.
But, like he would just tell you stories like, yeah, I went in this thing happened. I shot the guy. Like I was done with that, and it's just like, whoa, back up. As a matter of fact, one time I was small, I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and he had had a problem on some land he had leased. There were some guys who, on an adjacent piece of property, were growing marijuana. And they were, this is like in the 70s, right? So it's, and what they did was they put crops around the center of these large fields, and then they grow marijuana in the middle, so you couldn't see them from the road. And this was like way out in the middle of nowhere, dirt roads, everywhere. And so they had damaged some of his equipment because they wanted him off the land that he was farming so they could take that land.
Mm.
And he had gone to the sheriff, and the sheriff's like, "Oh, Jim." And they didn't, I don't think people really understood how off the rails he could get. We were all kind of descended from this Muskogee line of the southeastern Muskogee Nation, and Scotch Irish. It's just a terrible mix when you mix whiskey and firearms. It really is. Like all the things, all the stereotypical stuff from like Native Americans and Scotch Irish is like, don't feed them cheap whiskey and then give them a firearm. And that was his preferred mode of operation was,
Sure.
although he quit drinking after a heart attack when he was like 45 or 50, got
Oh,
saved, got,
nice.
but he was still himself. Okay. Having a religious experience a lot of times doesn't change you,
Yeah.
right? It does in many ways, but those core kind of
It just kind of
tendencies are
shifts the
still,
habits a little bit.
yeah, yeah. So he didn't get drunk before he shot people. Now he just did it for justifiable reasons.
No, you pray
Um,
first.
yeah. So one of the
Good
guys,
actor.
so they had damaged some of his property, like a tractor. They'd come along and cut some injectors on a tractor, and I was with him. I was always there with him, and
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to chumbacasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to chumbacasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
and when we left one night, they had chased us down this dirt road and were shooting at us. Like shoot, like it was a crazy time. And so
And
he had
you were
had
involved here
enough.
now
Yeah, I was riding in the pickup and so like he
as a
dodges
child.
across this field. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like I said, I was probably 10 or 11 at that time.
Okay.
And so like when people try to like when they now as an adult, I went through a phase where I got bullied a lot, but later I realized I was like, wait a second, you've been shot at, you've been beat, you've been done. Like, why are you letting somebody bully you? Like,
Yeah.
it's what are they exactly going to do other than kill you that hasn't happened yet?
Uh-huh.
Um, and so anyway, so that was the last straw for him. Okay. So the next thing I know, the next day, we're going to get the parts to fix what they had damaged. And he happens to see when we come up to a stop sign. You got to remember, like, well, you know, it's like you're out in the country, you're
Yeah,
on the
dirt roads.
nobody's around.
Nope.
It's like a major highway, but you're coming off a smaller road that connects. Well, one of the guys was sitting on a tractor. I remember that tractor like it was yesterday. It was a case it was back before Case and International Day. It was a Case tractor, and it had large, dual rear wheels on it. And he was sitting on it, waiting at the stop sign for some traffic to go by. And my grandfather snapped like he had one of these. His eyes rolled back in his head like a shark. Like, I mean, it literally, like I could only see the whites of his eyes, and he had big eyes. They were like these big, piercing, I mean, these small, kind of piercing, pupilish eyes. But they rolled back, and I looked at him, and all I could see was white, and his whole demeanor changed. And and I remember thinking to myself, even at 10, I'm like, so that's what you were really like. And he reached down because he always had a shotgun with him. He reached down, and I instinctively, as he pulled it up to move it out the window to shoot the guy in the head, that was his intent. He'd had enough. I threw my body on top of the shotgun and I was weighing it down. I said, "You can't kill him. You cannot kill him here." And And at some point, like he told me to get the fuck off his gun and he didn't hit me like, he could have easily like knocked me over. He didn't do that. And that guy has no idea to this day. He's probably dead now. It's a long time ago, but he had no idea his entire life that some 11-year-old kid saved him from being shot in the back of the head. I mean, it was probably 5 minutes. Finally, Travis, he moved. My grandfather sat there. He finally put the gun down, and in about 4 or 5 minutes, it probably seemed a lot longer, but it couldn't have been that much. His whole countenance changed. Like he just kind of went back. And all he just looked at me and said, "Don't ever do that again.
Yeah.
Don't ever do that again." And I was thinking, hey, I got an idea. How about you don't ever do that again? Like, so I say like And then he was extremely abusive to my father, very abusive. Like he would have that behavior. He shot at my father. Like he would run. He swore that my father was from another man. My grandmother never insanity, right? Like that just did not occur. And he left a lot of damage. So I decided somewhere along the way that I was going to do whatever it took to change 3 generations of bad behavior.
Good.
That was my goal. Because yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, it's like, these things kind of go along through the
They
generations. Like
compound. Yeah.
they had a lot of, they didn't have anything. They were worried about eating.
Hmm.
And so whatever actions they took, they were just worried about getting food, shelter. But you stack that up over several generations and you
And the
end up with some
culture
really,
is, I just want to say, the culture is that they'll complain about how they were treated by their parents and then turn around and do the exact same thing. So that's how like the perpetuation just continues on. So
right.
kudos for being like, okay, enough is enough. Because I don't know about you, but well, yeah, like you, I sat there and was like, well, this isn't what we're doing. This isn't what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. Okay, so now I've got a whole playbook on what not to do. Okay, what's better than that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And you work to not like my parents haven't come out. My father's life was so difficult, he volunteered to go to Vietnam to get away from it. Right.
Hmm.
Like that was Vietnam cannot be worse than this. And it
Right.
probably wasn't actually, although
Yeah.
he ended up this big dumb farm boy he was 6'4", 230 pounds, slim, like he was just a big human being. Um, And so, but they tested him, and somehow he had a propensity for languages. So they sent him to learn Vietnamese and put him in intelligence,
Cool.
which left him with a lot of scars along the way. Like, he would tell
Yeah.
me parts of the stories, but not the end of it. And I'm like, well, what happened to that guy? I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't. I'm like, well, you were the one that spoke Vietnamese, weren't you? Yeah. How'd they interrogate him without you? Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
Don't
He
want to
would
talk
just.
about it.
You could just see like he'd wake up in the middle of the night screaming in Vietnamese. Just like screaming. It's like it became kind of a normal thing from time to time would happen. But my parents decided they never wanted to be poor again. So what was the trade-off for being poor? You just worked, but you got off the farm and you worked. And so that I appreciate what they did because they really moved that next generation forward. I wouldn't live the life I have if they hadn't. But no, there are no free lunches. So what was traded was I never saw my parents really. I kind of grew up alone.
Hmm.
And and that led to opportunities for sexual abuse that kind of went on and went under not really who were you going to tell? Um, and then you pick up bad habits along the way to deal with some of those things. I started smoking, drinking way too early. But once you've been exposed to adult behaviors, what's one more adult behavior, right?
Yep.
Um, and I lost my mother. She was diagnosed when I was, I think, 11 with breast cancer. She ended up dying when I was 22, but she spent 5 years, 11 years at 3 different battles with breast cancer where she thought she was past it and then she wasn't. Um, and all of her sisters died from breast cancer. And then I got married, and somewhere along the way, I decided what I thought was just a pretty easy thing. I'm just going to correct 3 generations of bad behavior. I
Yeah,
just
no big deal.
do those things. Yeah, I suggest people think more deeply about these topics before they just commit themselves to like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, we had 4 children. Um, but again, no one outruns the universe. All those things that I had dealt with before eventually caught up with me. Things that I thought I had put out of my mind or that I was just not going to deal with. They were just things that happen in life, move on, caught up with me. And when I was 53, which I didn't think I would live past 53 because my mother died at 53. And I don't know why, but I just thought my mother and all her sisters died at 53. I don't think I'll make it past 53. And I just turned 53 and I started having these stomach pains, abdominal pains. And I didn't want to go to the doctor because I was like, nah, that's probably how I'm going to die. But my wife taught me to go into the doctor. And admittedly, I'd been partying way too hard. Um, Looking back on it, I realized it was just kind of a way to
Cope.
numb things out, to cope. Yeah. And I won't say it wasn't fun. I would just say that it led to, I think, eventually all of history and the side effects of partying to deal with history. I ended up going. I went to the doctor. He said, "I think I got a gallbladder problem." I said, "Okay, well, what do I do?" He said, "I'm gonna send you for an ultrasound. It's either the gallbladder will take it out, or you'll have gallstones." And the tech who was doing the ultrasound, I could see on her face something wasn't right, like. But and I was like, "What? What'd you see?" She's like, "Oh, nothing.
They're not
That's the
allowed to
doctor
tell
I'll talk to."
you.
And I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, that's not good." And they called me that afternoon, and they said the doctor's office said, "Hey, we found lesions on your liver. So we know you've got liver cancer. We
Mm.
need to send you in for an MRI." And I messaged my doctor and I said, "Hey, man, that's bad. Liver cancer's bad. But I partied hard, so it doesn't surprise me the liver would maybe fail on me at some point. Um, but at least it's not pancreatic cancer." And then they got the MRI results back the next day, and they're like, "Hey,
Actually.
you got pancreatic cancer, and it's stage 4. It's pancreatic cancer that spread to your
Mm.
liver." And I broke down and cried like a baby. I was like, I cannot believe, that not only because I'd always thought it was going to be something like prostate cancer. Like I figured I would get cancer because my mother and all her sisters had it. So I was like, yeah, it'll probably happen. But not pancreatic cancer. Like where the hell did that come from? Like should have been prostate cancer, colon cancer. It could have been anything. But where the hell pancreatic cancer come
So
from?
random.
It is, and it turns out that there's a small population that have the same genetic mutation that my mother and her sisters had, this BRCA mutation, BRCA mutation, that it shows up in some people as
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
pancreatic cancer. Small percentage, not a lot. Eventually, my oldest daughter, who's a doctor, found a place, um, a trial that they were running in a center at the University of Pennsylvania where they only deal with pancreatic cancer patients who have this genetic mutation. It was like the one place in the country that does it. Um, but after they gave me a lot of medication to calm me down, and I realized, because I don't want to leave my wife and children and all that kind of stuff. I started the treatments, and that went on for a while. A long time, still actually on one of the drugs in the cancer trial I started. But this August, I'll cross 7 years since diagnosis, and I'm in the one doctor told me it was 1,001%, 1,001% that I've made it this far, and the scans show no visible sign of disease. So doesn't really happen. There are people who make it this far, a small number of people who make it this far, but they can still see the tumors. They might be dormant, they might be dead tumor, just scar tissue, but they can still see them. So they can't see it. So I'm very blessed in that way. But that's a tough set of treatments they put you through because they're just throwing everything at it. They don't really
Yeah.
know. It's not like, oh, well, it's breast cancer, so we do these things. It's just got, oh, it's pancreatic cancer. We just throw the kitchen sink at it.
Hmm.
Took me 3 days to get the chemo in. One day in the infusion center, they would do the first two type. It was a 3 chemo treatment. The first 2 types of chemos, plus all the stuff they put around it so it doesn't kill you, right?
Right.
Antihistamine, steroid, like all this stuff to try to get your body not to react to it. They're like, we're going to poison you, and we're going to give you kind of an antidote, but not a full antidote, but something that will keep you from dying right now. Okay, and
Terrifying.
then they hook you up to a pump that gives you a chemo that is so. When they sent me home the first time with the pump, they sent me with a hazmat bag. And I said, why do I need a hazmat bag? And they said, well, if the tube were to come out the pump or for whatever reason the IV were to pop out and any of this spills, you got to grab the pump, put it in this bag, and you got to call the fire department. They got to bring a hazmat team. I said, well, we're putting that inside me. And they said, yeah, don't let it spill. And I thought, this is not good stuff. Like you're putting inside me stuff. Like I don't call the hazmat team if I get it inside me, but I do call them if it falls out. Um, so there was a long story behind the cancer treatment, and I thought that was the worst. And I even said then it's like, yeah, it can't get worse than this. But it turns out
Yeah.
never say that
Yeah.
because it can. Because on June the 7th, 2021, I found the body of my son who had taken his own life.
Oh,
And so now I just say, I really hope I experience nothing worse than what I've experienced. I know it's out there. I just really appreciate not experiencing anything else.
how old was
So
he?
that's kind of the history of, you know, the what I've worked to do is from that is to tell people who are going through very difficult times and difficult times for them. Like some people say, well, I haven't been through all that. And I'm like, doesn't matter. Where you are is where you are. Like that's your thing that you're carrying. And that there is, for me, I ended up collecting these little phrases, 15 of them that looking back, they kind of represented ideas, principles that I could kind of hold on to. And, when I got frustrated about having to do EMDR, because of, my son's choices, my son's suicide, and
How old was he?
that would open, he was 18.
Oh man.
Um, he told us at 9 that he wanted to kill himself, 9 years of age. He told his mother.
Yeah.
He had no access to internet. I'm sorry.
My son started having similar conversations with me at age 7.
I like it's still stunning to me. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know. I, don't- my son had no access to internet. He didn't have friends who had parents or siblings who had killed themselves. He did, and there's just like, yeah, I don't really see a purpose. I'm like 9 years old. Can you know about a purpose to life? It's like I don't really see any use in it. I'm gonna, I think killing myself is the way that is what I will eventually do. Uh, how did you deal with it with your son?
I mean, I'm still just dealing with it, it's gotten a lot better than it was. He just turned 10, and we're in the transition period of homeschooling him. So he's been in public school, and I think that has had a lot to do with it because he's so incredibly smart. He started having existential crises at age 2. Like at age 2, he started having breakdowns talking about how he doesn't want to die. He doesn't want us to die. He doesn't want like all of these things. What's after death at age 2. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of
Yeah.
escalated to where it's just the pressure and weight of life has been so heavy on him already. And for no specific reason other than he's
Yeah.
just too damn smart for his own good. He's just too self-aware. And so what I've done is just every single night at bedtime, we spend like 30 minutes hanging out. And
Yeah.
so he'll talk to me, and I just kind of keep really close tabs on what's going on in his head. And then, so we're working on homeschooling. He'll be homeschooling next. Uh, so this semester's almost over, and we'll be hitting summer. And then in the fall, he'll start virtual school. So he'll be homeschooling virtually with me, and then I'll be able to, and then he's in the gifted program, so he'll go to a physical classroom once a week. And then I'll be able to also get him into some clubs that he's interested in, because one of the problems with living in the boondocks of Alabama is if you're not into sports, I just hate it
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
We got
Yeah.
nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's not. He'd rather be into coding and video games.
Yeah.
And
100%.
he likes chess. He likes to build things. He likes robotics and Legos and cooking class.
Mhm.
He likes to cook. So, but there's clubs, local clubs that I can put him in, but they're all for like Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. So they're for homeschool.
Yeah. Right.
So in
Right.
order for us to help him, so that's just all we're doing. I've been watching what he's actually into, what lights him up, and I can't support those desires and interests with the public school system. So we're
Hmm.
shifting so that we can just kind of like, what do we like? Let's just focus on what we like. So that's and
Listen,
hey,
I commend you for
friends
it.
come over and yes. So
I
I'm trying
commend
to
you
stay
for
ahead
it.
of it.
We ended up taking all four of ours, and my wife homeschooled them. She stayed home. I was a single income family, and she stayed home and raised the children, and then took on homeschooling them. I've got, it's kind of. I know this may seem like dark humor, okay, but
No, I live in the dark.
sometimes that's
You have to
sometimes
laugh,
that's how
but you
you
don't
deal
cry.
with it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we like to say all four of our children have been successful, right? They were homeschooled, but they've been successful. My oldest is a daughter. My youngest is a developer, a commercial developer. My oldest son he travels and is like an influencer. It's basically like missions work for him. He has a big belief that too many people stay inside big cities and never see creation, and
Yes.
that if they want to find peace, they need to find creation because that's where, yeah,
Yes.
it makes him emotional. He's great.
I agree
So
that.
they've all been successful. Even Heston, who killed himself on the first try. So so I mean, it's
Oh, yeah,
people. Yeah, I mean, people think like, how do you say that? What am I going to do? You
haha.
gotta.
Yeah. Gotta
Um,
laugh and
it
if
is. It's a
cry.
very sad situation, but I like to think of them all as being successful. Um, but I commend you on that because it's a difficult path, but it's. My wife did very similar things. Like, she would do the schoolwork in like 3 or 4 hours, which I don't know how it takes 9 or 10 hours, but it like they would do that, and then they would focus on what each individual child, like where their focus was.
Mhm.
And they did field trips and they learned, so you could have gone to any of my children and said, explain to me how a pulp paper mill works. And they would tell you because she had taken them through a large paper mill, and that's, and they just gotten this tour for manufacturing and all that kind of stuff. I think they had a great education life. Um, you know, what I would say that I saw in my son, again, like yours, too highly intelligent, too high IQ for his own good. And so he did see things very black and white, uh, not a lot of gray. And he was a soft, he was an old soul, but he was a very soft soul. And this is a very difficult place for soft souls.
Mhm.
There is a level of, I mean, I don't want to say ruthlessness, but certainly a level of fortitude that existing in this plane requires.
Yeah.
And he was just too good a human being. Like he was justice mattered to him, right and wrong, hypocrisy, those things. But if there is one piece of advice I pass along to people who have children that have dealt with these challenges, it is keep them away from Nietzsche and keep them away from Marcus Aurelius's diaries. Those are works. Nietzsche was really kind of,
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at chumbacasino.com. That's chumbacasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void were prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
Nietzsche had a lot of problems in his life. Okay. Like he had a lot of problems. So he had a view of life that was not exactly what one might think of as positive and, and Marcus Aurelius's diaries were his diaries. He wrote things that if you're in a really good mental place, kind of like Nietzsche, if you're in a good mental place, you can read Nietzsche and go like, yeah, but I don't really agree with that and that kind of thing. That's kind of, but if you're in a dark place, if you're close to the tunnel and the tunnel is kind of seductively pulling you in, someone reinforcing that God is dead and there's no kind of meaning, or Marcus Aurelius's diary saying, when what he's really communicating is that if you're at peace, you do what's right, and you know, be stoic about it. You may die, but die with honor, and and death is not to be feared. But if you're in a dark place, not fearing death, taking those same concepts and applying them in all of a sudden, you know, I believe my son applied some of those principles in ways that the authors probably didn't intend
Hmm.
for him to do, but he started reading. He was into languages and philosophy, before he turned eight. By the time he was 18, you could say he was fluent, but certainly becoming fluent in writing and speaking Latin. And he read all the great philosophical works from, the Bible through, the Greek philosophers. When you said, like your son had an existential crisis, like, what could you possibly be? You're nine. What? You have everything you need, but in his world, the world itself was an existential crisis.
Yeah.
Like he could just see, and he thought he could forecast the future, like he would simplify the future down and then forecast it out. And he's like, yeah, it's just, there's really no reason to be here. Um, I don't personally understand that because I've worked hard to stay alive. So I don't have that same point of view, and the things that I would offer him would not resonate with him because we came from such a different point of view.
Mhm.
So I would just commend you for what you're doing and the focus you're putting in the way you're handling the situation and spending time talking to him. I think that's wonderful.
That's really all you can do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I completely understand like their crushing despair with the weight of existence because the more you know, the more likely you are to turn towards the darkness and just let it take you and melt away into it, and it is really overwhelming, really spiraling. And I think that that is one of the biggest issues that we have with like the mental health crisis. There's lots of problems. Lots of directions. There's the accumulation of generational trauma for sure. And then now we're in the age of information, so we're capable of exploring the philosophies and all of that. And it just, before the internet, you had to go outside and play in the dirt, and it made things feel a lot easier and a lot safer. And you know, the news, we're constantly bombarded with all of the terrible things in the world, and we're all working ourselves to death just for inflation to continue raising prices on everything. Relationships are falling apart and coming back together, and we don't have the villages that we had centuries ago.
Mhm.
I was talking to a lady yesterday about how uh, she was talking about how she has to help her brother with her mother, and because her mother's getting older, and so that comes with things and stuff. And she was discussing how she had to do that, and I was telling her, we all have heard it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village. Period for every single individual, no matter what stage. So it takes a
Mhm.
village not only to raise a child, but also to just exist in the not crushing despair, because there's nothing more important than our relationships. But like you said earlier, the formation of these little clans are getting a lot smaller, and that puts even more pressure on the individuals that are in that clan, because now instead of dividing out all of my son's needs between me and his dad and his aunts and his uncles and his cousins and his brothers and sisters and his grandparents on both sides and then the neighbor kids, and we could spread out all the needs of one individual, because one individual needs a lot, and it becomes too much for three people to handle. You need a village of 50 to accommodate all of the emotional needs of the single individual. And, that puts so much pressure on parents that are trying to do right by their children while they're also drowning in their own emotional needs and don't know where to
Mhm.
turn and don't know who to ask for help, don't know how to ask for help.
Yeah, I think you've described it extremely well. As an example, I truly believe if my mother had been alive, my son would still be alive. You also need kind of the breadth of that community, of that family unit, not just the nuclear family, but that larger family structure.
Hmm.
Because in a larger family structure, inevitably one or two of those people will sync up with another person who without them would have been alone.
Yes.
And my mother would have adored him. He would have adored his grandmother, and they would have had a communication where I really believe, you know, she would have just had a way of understanding him, but we didn't have that. So that was left to just me and his mother.
Yeah.
Um, and and his siblings were frankly too young to understand or deal with any of that, right? And so I do agree with you 100%. I mean, it is, and the knowledge, our family physician, wonderful human being. Um, he had seen Heston on a fairly regular basis because he knew and he knew kind of where he was. Um, and his wife, our family physician's wife is a psychiatrist, and she had seen Heston as well as another psychiatrist. And um, but you can only make somebody do. You can offer them things to do. The person has to decide to do them. And I think it's easier with, geez, I don't, it's not that other people are dumber, but when you get to a certain level of intelligence, you make decisions irrespective, right? Like those doctors aren't smart enough to tell me what to do, right? Like they're just not. And, um, and so,
What a dangerous realization to have.
right, right. I mean, it's just like, so I don't listen to them. I'll just do it myself. And I'll do it when I want and how I want. So I'll wait until it gets really bad and then I'll try to do what they said, but that'll be too late because I needed to do it. It's just, but he had seen him about 10 days before and he always took extra time to talk to him, just to talk to him and see how he was doing, talk about whatever was going on. He felt connected to him. So he wanted to make sure he was okay because I'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So he wanted to make sure the family was okay. And when he killed himself, um, our family physician was really kind of personally devastated by it, because he's like, I just met with him. I really thought, he was turning a corner. He was out of it. And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, Andy, it's the patients I worry about the most are the highly intelligent ones.
Hmm.
If you're of average intelligence, the chances you're going to kill yourself are pretty low.
Hmm.
But if you're highly intelligent, you you think you know so much that, like you said, the despair, you just right or wrong, you realize, and I use, both right, you realize that this is futile and there is no way to win and there is no purpose, a real purpose to it, and like we're stuck in these four dimensions. And these are things that I've talked to Heston about, over the years, right? And he said, you never see people with Down syndrome try to kill themselves. I've never had one of my patients try to do it because you know why? I don't, they're just, they don't really seem to have the capacity.
Hmm.
But then you take somebody who's got a high IQ and he goes, they're happy. The person who has basically everything in front of them that, can accomplish so much. He said those are the most, and I think it's because, like what you said, it's not even really being unhappy to them. It's just looking at things realistically.
Hmm.
Heston believed it was. I was like, but I don't think that's reality. Like, I don't. And he said, but this is. He used to tell me suicide was the most logical thing. if you saw the world the way I do, and by that he meant correctly, he didn't mean like his view was flawed. He meant like my view was flawed and he saw it for what it was, then it seemed logical to him.
It's a
It didn't
series of
seem, it
painful.
was.
It's just a series of painful events, like really
Yeah.
excruciatingly painful. And yeah, I mean, it makes the most sense to, if you just go ahead and opt out, you don't have to experience any of that pain because I mean, inevitably, we're all going to die anyway. So might as well just like skip the pain and go straight to it.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
That's you've just described his philosophy,
Yeah.
of where he finally ended up at. And he was better for a while, and then something snapped, and I'll never know exactly what it was.
Could it
The
have
day
been a
before.
diagnosis? What was, how far?
No, this was years later. And I
Oh,
remember him
okay.
telling me, I said, Heston, listen, if for no other reason, you need to be here for your mother, okay? Like you're very close with your mother. He was the youngest, so they had more time to spend together, because she homeschooled them all, but he was the youngest, so as they kind of moved on and into other things, they got a lot of time to spend together. Um, and and I would say, because I very well could die from this thing, and your mother can't withstand two of this. So I was working to approach it kind of logically with him. I'm like, look, I get it. Okay, I don't agree with it, but that's your position. But at least hold off on what you're doing, because I could die and I've stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And he would
And
tell me, I'm sorry.
I was just dark humor. So sorry. When
No,
you can't handle both, so now that he did, you have no choice but to.
no, look, dark humor is how our family gets through these things, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you can tell that when it's done, everybody is really, it's painful underneath. But, like I said about the success thing, that comes up all the time. It's like, nobody will ever say Heston was unsuccessful. He may have killed himself, but he was successful. I mean, everybody has a different way of kind of dealing with the pain. And,
Yeah.
but
What did
I
he say
told him, I
though?
said, oh, he multiple times he said this to me, and he was, I mean, I hate to kind of say with like a dead face, but that's not what I'm saying. Like I'm saying, he would look at me with like a straight dead stare, and he would say, "You're not dying. You're not dying from this." As if he could just tell the future. He's like, "You're not dying from that." I'm like, Heston, you don't really know. I mean, and at that time I was still going through chemotherapy and I was going through all this stuff, and I'd had two major back surgeries during the cancer trial. Like, disc blew out, and I had to, and so it was a rough time. And I was like, you just don't know, Heston. Like and he's like, I'm just telling you, you're not dying. You're not dying from this. And I was like, you don't know. And he's like, I know. And that's all he would say. I know. And so far he turned out to be right. But I don't know. He was, yeah, he was a little too sure of himself, you know. I mean, he was a little too sure of himself. But, we persist, and you have to decide whether when these things occur, um, how one will. I mean, we knew it was a possibility for 9 years, but when it finally happened, it was you cannot prepare for it. I mean, it's devastating. I mean, it if I was and I'm positive that my saying it the way I'm saying it will have little impact to a person who is. My wife described it as being you walk inside the tunnel, and when you're thinking about it, you're putting like one foot inside this dark tunnel. Like as soon as you enter the outer edge of the tunnel, it's completely black. And so you kind of put one foot in when you're thinking about it. But then once you step into it, it's just a very seductive thing. It just draws you into it.
Mm.
And, because she went right after he committed suicide, I thought she was going to as well. And I guess there are stats that show that people close to someone who commits suicide are at a higher likelihood of doing the same. Um, yeah. Now I don't remember what I was telling you at the time, but what I would tell somebody in that situation, although I'm not certain that it would resonate with them, although if it does for just one, is the reason I say it. I I, I want them to know that when they opt out, the pain does not go with them. The
It gets
pain that they feel, huh?
it gets transferred.
That's all that happens. It stays and it actually grows.
Hmm.
And it like a cancer will infect everyone who loved them, everyone who was close, and it'll affect everyone who knew of them. And worst of all, it will, the same way my her perseverance through cancer, the way she died over 11 years, the 11 years it took her to die, taught me more about how to live than any other lesson I took from life. I watched her persevere. Like she just refused until everything failed. She would just, no matter the setback, no matter what, she would just, that spirit is now generationally forward, right? Like it impacted me. My children have seen me persevere. It'll impact them. It'll impact their children and so on. And ending your life will do the exact same thing. It too will persist over generations.
Hmm.
The generations that you will not contribute to, the things you will not do, the people who have now been infected by that pain. I think it's far better for people who are having suicidal ideations or are on the verge to consider the possibility that it's better to stay and diminish the pain
Hmm.
and possibly even extinguish the pain without extinguishing their own life. Because then that perseverance and their existence is what will transfer forward generations. And the pain will stay here diminished. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to go forward. But if they exit, the pain would just run wild,
Hmm.
right? So I don't know if that makes sense, but in my
It
mind, it's
does.
just,
It does, because suicide is it's a bit selfish. It's a bit selfish. And, if you do see the despair, like I mentioned earlier, I get it. We're all going to die eventually. It's just a series of painful events until we do. And sure, you could
mm-hmm.
skip out until it's like straight to the end and skip all the in between. And sure, it would probably hurt a whole lot less. But the same despair
Well, it
that
will hurt
has,
you a lot less.
right,
It'll
right.
hurt you. Not everybody else won't be hurt less,
That's
right?
why it's selfish.
Right? Yeah, I don't. It's not. I don't think it's intentionally selfish, but it turns out that way, right? It is.
Yeah. Well, they don't realize it because they can't see outside of themselves. They can't see a point and a purpose to their own life. Therefore, it's not going to affect anybody else. Like, yeah, mom and dad will be upset for a little while, but they'll be okay. They don't understand it, especially if you don't have kids of your own. You don't get it. But I mean, there's
Not
people.
only will they be okay, I think they think they'll be better. They'll be better without me causing all these problems. They'll be better without all this, right?
Yeah. So my coping mechanism for all of this, because the only reason I didn't opt out as a teenager is because I was smart enough to know that all of the circumstances that was causing me to want to would be over by the time I turned 19. I could move
God,
out. I could move.
if only, right?
Right.
If only people could realize that it is
Yes. It's
temporary.
temporary. And then you can take your life. And if you're so upset about how the world is, then work to do something about it. Because exactly how we created this entire mess that we all live in, this emotional wreck that we all have to deal with, is hurt people hurting people. It just perpetuating that trauma over and over and over again to not only generationally, but to everybody you interact with. Feelings and emotions are contagious. And just like you're having an okay day and then you run into somebody grumpy, like a cashier or somebody at the grocery store that were just complete assholes, and now you're mad for the next 6 hours. The same thing happens if you have an interaction with someone who's chipper and happy. You're like, oh, you know what? They're the good in the world. And then that makes you happy for the next 6 to 8 hours. And if you have a hard time sinking into the, like, getting out of the darkness, then stick around to be that person for other people. You know, you can't find the sunshine, then be the sunshine. And it is as simple as faking it. You know, you can have, like, I've been having the shittiest week I could begin to explain to you, but nobody knows except for those that are closest to me. I've
Yeah.
been smiling, and because smiling is not something that you have to be happy in order to do, it's a muscle respond. Like you can, just like I can raise my hand, I can put a smile on my face, you know, and then that communicates to your body that everything's okay. And then once your mind follows suit. So it's like,
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
you know, even if you can't tame the thoughts and the emotions inside of you, you can choose to just fake a smile or ha ha, dark humor, you know, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to have
Yeah.
dark humor.
It is. A lot
And
of people resist that. And I'm like,
they
hey,
do.
you're kind of taking one of the arrows out of your quiver, honestly. Like that's kind of a way I think we were designed to deal with some things.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, there's all sorts of mechanisms that and staying busy. That's something that helps me a lot is if I have too much time on my hands, I immediately get like, unreasonably depressed.
I
So,
talked to a guy who had attempted to kill himself. And he told me, he said, I know it's an old cliche that idle time is the devil's time.
mm,
But for me, idle time is when the dark shows up
yeah.
and that I have to stay, I have to recognize that, if it shows up, my mind will go there. So I have to purposely give my mind something to do. And the way I do that is I get my hands busy. And if my
Mhm.
hands are busy, then my mind has to focus on what I'm doing and it pulls me away from that thing. So I guess there are some of those old cliches that,
Cliches are
I've
cliches.
heard that cliches exist because they're statistically accurate, and so I think that's maybe one of the examples of that.
Yeah, they made it into the hall of cliches for a reason.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, for me, cliches are a way to kind of remember things. Like I said,
Yeah.
they're like metadata. They're like up here, and there's all this other stuff beneath it. But you just remember. So, like when you said, like things will not. These things are temporary, and if you could get to 19, then things would change, and then this would change, and for me, like one of my core beliefs is I tend to kind of lean toward mathematics in some areas, and so to me, equations are constant, but variables change,
Hmm.
and you can change the variable. And I think I got that when I was studying finance in college. A lot of the variables were static. I mean, a lot of the equations were static. It's like if this equation has this many variables, and no matter what you put in those variables, it will sum to something, but the equation will always work.
Hmm.
You change the output by changing the variables. And so when you're in something where you feel like I'm stuck, it's like, well, you're looking at the equation. The equation is stuck. The equation is what it is. But you do have some influence over what those variables are. And some of those variables will just change over time. Give them
Hmm.
time to change, and then the outcome will change.
Hmm.
Um, but I think in my way of saying it, we I've noticed with myself when I feel stuck is because it's like I'm looking at the construct and I'm like, well, I don't see how the construct's going to change, And so then that kind of brings me down. But then if I step into what is inside the construct, then that makes me think, oh, well, wait a minute, there's variables there. And I know from math, from mathematics that the variables can change. One over time, one I could influence some change. One, they will change unexpectedly, like the universe will change the variables. Like,
Hmm.
don't get your eyes off the equation and focus on the variables because you can do something about the variables, right?
Yeah, most time people need to zoom out a little bit. If you get stuck in this place, you're too zoomed in to like
Yeah,
most of the time just your head and what's going on inside of it. So if you can just like step one, get out of your head and into your environment, into your body, even like, your head's only a very small portion of your existence. You got the rest of this also. And I teach yoga and meditation. So I'm always telling, and I focus on anxiety and stress relief. That's my specialty. And I'm always telling my students and people and everybody that'll listen that your nervous system is regulated or can be regulated by bringing your shoulders back and down. Again,
really.
yes. So just like I can choose to raise my hand, I can choose to bring my shoulders back and down and open up my chest and sit up tall, have that good posture. And that signals there's a whole host of things that you can do physically that signals to your nervous system that everything's okay. And once your body is like, hey, sending signals to your brain that, hey, everything's okay, your brain starts to go, you sure? Is it? Okay. And it starts to kind of like come, they feed off of one another. Just like when you're replaying scenarios in your head of like past traumas, your body is having a physical reaction.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same thing in both directions. So you can create trauma in the body by just thinking about things that, something you said earlier. I have I have clients come to me and they're like, I can tell that I have PTSD. I am dealing with trauma. But like all of these things that are wrong in my life are trauma responses. All of these things these are coping mechanisms, but I don't have any trauma. Like I had a great childhood. I have no complaints. Everything in my life has gone peachy key. Like explain to me how I'm so traumatized, but I have no trauma. And so there's this thing called secondary trauma, and just by and it again really affects people who have high empathetic capacities,
Mhm.
who can like put themselves in other people's shoes and really feel those deep emotions and sorrow for other people and their experience.
Yeah.
And so, you're watching the news of some poor kid in the Ukraine getting pulled out of the rubble, all bloodied up and whatnot, or crying, and you're immediately you have this entire physical reaction of, oh my God, they're this poor baby, their parents, their home, like that must be so devastating. So that is trauma that you have just taken on
Yeah.
in your own
Yeah.
body. So, I don't know. Maybe lay off the social media news. That's a good start.
It's but when you're discussing that, it really ties into and gives like a tangible example of something. I was watching a lot of different like documentaries and stories or videos about cancer when I first got diagnosed. And one of the videos that wasn't really related to cancer, but it was super interesting to me, was that they had discovered, once they got to like 8K, uh, 8K cameras, like they could see these, they would see, it's kind of like, they call it that zinc spark when, at the moment that the sperm fertilizes the egg, there's like this little electrical spark that happens that nobody had ever seen. Like people talk about the spark of life, but then they had like this 8K camera looking at it and they're like, oh shit, there is a spark of life, like
Yeah.
it happens, and And they were talking about how they had been able to see that it wasn't the brain that controlled all these functions, that organs talk to one another, and that the kidneys were talking actually to the liver about things, and it would change the respiratory rate because the kidneys needed to move that carbon dioxide out of the bloodstream. And the brain was just like, yeah, whatever. It's like I recognize that I'm breathing harder now than I was before, but it really doesn't know why. It's
Mhm.
this organ to organ communication that happens, and they were talking about the things that happen with the heart and how it talks to and they had captured these little sparks. I mean, I call them sparks, but like these like protein explosions these little explosions that would release proteins that would flow to the other organs, and they would flow to specific organs for a specific task, but they would skip all the other organs. Like the heart would have this little burst, and then these proteins would run out and go to the kidneys and the liver. And then the liver would have, like, it would receive that message, and then it would send a message, and these proteins would go to the lung and the pancreas,
Mhm.
and but it wouldn't go any place else. They would follow the protein, and they're like, that's strange. But I think it really supports what you're saying about when you were saying you can smile. And then, it's basically like if you can do these other things, physically make those choices to do those things, like you said, like putting your shoulders back. So your brain, in a lot of ways, follows along. It's
Yep.
not quite the leader that forever we were told it is. And, it's like how much serotonin does every other part? Well, it's the gut that produces 70% of the serotonin, right? And then it crosses over, and if the brain uses it, fine. But I'm just saying, like, in a lot of ways, the brain's kind of it's like this passively active thing that you do have some, like if you can get your other parts of your body to just do what they need to do, like the brain, like you said, like the brain be like, oh, it's not that bad. It's like it's not even in control. Like it's the kidneys telling the liver that no, things are fine.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Because you sat up straight or whatever, right? I mean, it's actually kind of fascinating because I've always thought I grew up thinking the brain was the control center.
Right.
And I get it in a lot of ways for thinking and that kind of stuff. But
That's just where all of our senses are. That's where,
yeah,
but there's actually there's neurons in your body, or sorry, in your heart and your gut, just like there's neurons in your brain. And there's actually more communication going from your heart to your brain than vice versa.
yes,
It's just we get stuck in our heads because it's communication and how, it's where all our senses are located. But we are not our brains. We are like and I'm this kind of skirts on spirituality, but you can kind of everybody I think can agree if they really sit and think about it. You are not your brain or your thoughts. You are the conscious observer of
yeah,
what your brain and thoughts are doing.
yes,
Your brain's purpose and job is to notice when things are awry and problematic and potentially dangerous so that we can work around those. That's it. And that's why we're anxious and stressed out all the time. And that's
hmm
why we remember all the bad stuff so easily, but we don't remember the good because your brain goes, "Oh, that's safe. It doesn't matter." But they go, "Oh, that's dangerous. I need to pay incredible attention to that."
yeah,
So
yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why I found EMDR. Are you familiar with EMDR? Is it?
what is it? Maybe.
I think it's eye rapid movement
Oh, okay,
something
yeah.
EM
Yeah, yeah.
move eye something rapid. Anyway, they basically walk you back through these traumatic circumstances, and they have these buzzers going off, these things going off on your fingers, and you listen to sounds. But it kind of, again, in support of what you're saying, it's basically the mind is it's basically building a different neural pathway for those memories that are now have been kind of uh, interfered with by this other, like your brain has to focus on this buzz and the sounds
Hmm.
when you're remembering this. So desensitizes the memory and it forces it down a different neural pathway because the brain has always taken that thing and anything that it might consider remotely close to being like that thing and or the experience of that thing, it just sends it down that same neural pathway. So you might get, like you're saying, in these secondary traumas, you might have the exact same response as if you were remembering being molested as a child. But
Mm,
it's this other thing. But your brain just sends it all down the trauma highway,
mm,
right? It's like it just all goes down there. And so EMDR kind of, well, it does. I don't think they really know why it works, but it works in kind of telling your brain, don't have this visceral reaction. So the buzzing and everything kind of strips off all the visceral physical reaction from it and routes it down this other pathway where that physical reaction doesn't exist anymore. So then when you think about that thing, you're thinking in a way where the emotional reaction to it has been stripped off of it. So you can just think about it. I can't remember what the type of or the either the type of therapy or the principle behind it, but like you said, the ability to observe
mhm.
is really important. Like
Yes.
the ability to step back and not like disassociate, but to step
I mean,
back and just
sometimes
kind of watch.
disassociation is great.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has its place, I guess, right? I mean, it
All
does
things
have its
do.
place. Um, but to be able to just observe and not become part of,
Yeah. Observe,
that's a
don't absorb.
yeah. Didn't now is that a standard kind of term?
Oh no, I
Observe
don't
but
know. It
don't
just popped in my
absorb.
head. Have I heard it before?
Yeah, I
Maybe.
like that. I like you should save that one because I'm going to use it actually.
Do.
Um, because I think, that's kind of the essence of it, right? Observe, but don't get absorbed by it. I don't know. I'm nowhere near as proficient at being able to do that as I would like to be.
Sure.
You care what I would say is the sooner you deal with these things, the far better off you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, um, you will always fight the habit of dealing with things the way you once did, even when you know that you don't have to do it that way anymore. So, I would also encourage people to, don't try to outrun the universe, confront it early and
Yeah.
just go ahead and deal with the pain early. I remember one therapist told me, I didn't want to do EMDR. That's after my son. And, because I knew she described to me what it was going to be like. We're going to walk down these memories. And one of the first ones she wanted to deal with, she wanted me to go through like 15 minutes before I found him.
Mm.
Like what I did to I had to walk up the stairs. The door was locked. I had to come back downstairs without my wife realizing that something was wrong. I had to go to the garage, get a screwdriver, come back in, acted like everything was fine, go back up the stairs, jimmy the door open, get in, not see him on one side, and then look behind the door, and I found him. And I mean, I can go through that now because I've like been through, it's still emotional, but I can go through it. Before I would just turn into a puddle,
Sure.
right? I mean, like I got,
Sure.
as a matter of fact, when I first started going through the process, um, I would walk to the top of the stairs. I could see myself going down, so I could remember what it felt like. And it was, man, it's like you talk about like so close to a panic attack. I did have one during an EMDR session. It's the only time I experienced it. I have some empathy now for people who deal with panic attacks. Like I had never really, to my knowledge, I had never dealt with that. Maybe I had had a panic attack, but anyway, I walk back upstairs in this memory, and the buzzing's going off, and my heart is starting to race, man. I'm like, because I know what's on the other side, but I couldn't open the door. Like in my memory, the door would not open. I couldn't get it open. So we had to relive that like 4 or 5 times until I could get the door open. And eventually the door opened, but the room was black. And I knew that there were two windows and that morning the sun was shining in. No light was needed. The room was full of light, but it probably took 10 cycles of going through that to be able to get to the place where I could walk. I could go through, open the door. I could see the room, all the light. I knew all the objects in the room, and I could kind of walk all the way through to the end of it. And so she had kind of told me what we were you don't know until you start doing it, what it's really gonna be like. But she told me kind of what to expect. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And she said, well, I think, this is what we need to do. This is, how we deal with these things. And And I said, no, um, I don't want to go through that.
I would
I
rather
don't think I'm
choose
able to go
avoidance,
through that.
please.
Huh?
I would rather choose avoidance, please.
Oh, 100%, right? And she said something that I will not, um, I mean, it's like one of those little things that somebody says to you. You've said a couple of them today that I'm gonna like, I got to take that with me. I'm gonna take that with me. Um, and she said, Andy, we can spend 10 hours working through this. And whenever you think about it, you will not have the reaction that you do now. We can spend 10 hours confronting this. Or you can experience that pain every moment for the rest of your life
Yep.
because you will feel it whether it's conscious or not.
Yep.
And I was like, look, I'm not a tremendously bright human being, but that does not sound like the deal I want to avoid. Like, I mean, so you're certain we can get through it. Now 15 turned into 20, 10 turned into 15, into 20. But the point is, she was right. And,
Hmm.
you know, no matter how painful it may appear, or how alluring avoidance is, that phrase that she told me was, she's like, well, you are living with it every minute. So we either do this for 10 hours or you feel the pain the rest of your life every minute of every day.
Hmm.
And man, she was right. Like I realized in that, and that was the moment I realized I had been feeling every moment of every day, all the pain from the other things that had occurred, right? And that's how it turned into a lot longer because it was, once you open that door, it's kind of like a web search, and it's like, oh, click on that link, click on that link. And then you're like, the hell was I even doing when I
Yep.
started? I don't remember why I came here. I think I was looking for something at Home Depot, and now I'm looking at, the Mona Lisa at the Louvre. I don't know how I got here,
Uh,
and it was kind of the same process, but I am convinced that she was right. You
yeah.
either you either face it for a short, difficult period of time, or you carry it with you the rest of your life.
Hmm.
So,
That's been my
yeah,
philosophy for sure. I learned, through a series of unfortunate events that the more you face the things and the more that you just accept them for what they are and you let yourself feel the emotions and like yeah, it absolutely feels like it's going to literally shatter you into pieces from the inside out. Like a
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on chumbacasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at chumbacasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's chumbacasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void were prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
emotional explosion, but like a literal grenade inside of you
yeah,
is going, like the
yeah.
shards are just going to rip through every cell in your body, and that's going to be that. And yeah, that's exactly how it feels sometimes. But if you just let the grenade explode, then you don't have a grenade anymore ticking away.
You don't, you don't. And along those lines of you just like you can't avoiding the feeling it. As my wife and I went through, I still do. I mean, it's only been 4 years, right? I talk to people who, lost people, a spouse or put a child in, 40 years later. It's like my grandmother was like 90. She still remembered her son that died from colic at 6 months old, right? Like
Hmm.
she still, like, I don't, so I guess it doesn't go away. Um, but I remember, we would talk about, we had talked about how you feel like you're making progress, and then, like the stages of grief are not linear. You don't actually walk through them. They just kind of circle around in this meandering, odd way.
Hmm.
And my wife was saying, I still like I go back and it starts all over again, like it can't be real. what could I have done different? Fuck him. Like you
Yeah.
go through all the, it's like, and until you can just go, well, I guess it is what it is. I mean, this is where we are. And we were talking about one day, and I said, her name is Liza. And I said, Liza, the way I see it in my mind is like a hamster wheel. You're going to get on the hamster wheel. And if you don't feel those things, like all those emotions, you will get stuck on the hamster wheel. So if the objective is to kind of, you get thrown into the hamster wheel, and if the objective is to get off the hamster wheel, don't get off of it before you have felt the emotions that as you go around. Because, like if you sit with the emotion, if you feel the emotions, then you can get off the hamster wheel. Like the cycle will just kind of play itself out.
Mm.
And I think I found that it does that. Like you've got to go through the cycle and you've got to feel it, and then the cycle completes. But if you stop that cycle, like if you stop going through it and feeling it, then the cycle will stay. Like it just kind of sits on hold, waiting for you to feel everything so that the cycle can complete. If that makes sense when I'm
Yeah,
working
it's
to
like one of those
communicate.
wind up toys. It's wound up anyway. So you can
Yes,
stop it, but like it's got to go through
that's a
the
great way to say
stop.
it. That's no, it's a, that's a great visualization of it, right? I mean, it's like you do, like you can just, like you used to have those little things where the wings would kind of, and you just stop it, and then, but it's still just waiting to go. You haven't actually let it play its course, and I think that that's a great way to say it, because
And
I
it's
think
a
that's kind of
whole
how
lot
some of
to
these
just
things
sit there and
are.
hold it, because
Yeah,
you got to hold it in order to stop it. And
right.
it's really exhausting, and I kind of need my hands to do the other things. It's the same
Yes, that's a
thing.
great visual. Yes, that's a great visual and a really useful way to think about it. That really is, because I think it's accurate. You
Hmm.
know, you you have to let it unwind,
Hmm.
and then you can go about your day. And the sooner you let it appropriately unwind, the
Hmm.
sooner you will be able to, the cycle will complete. And then it may get wound up the next day.
But
But
it's
if you
worth
hold
it.
on to it like you described, it will just sit and wait. It'll sit and wait on you. Grief is very patient.
It is
Like
so
it
patient. Yes.
it is very patient. It will just wait on you, you know.
Yeah, it's like a stubborn lady just sitting there like, okay, you can do what you need to do, but I'm still angry and you're gonna
Right.
listen as soon as you get a
Right,
chance.
right,
As soon as we get a chance, you give me
right.
an opportunity and we're gonna talk about it.
We are going to talk about it. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just better, as my grandmother, one of the worst days when I was a child, not like a worst day, but I remember I got spanked 3 times one day. I was staying with my grandmother, and I had been the old lady staring at made me think of this. She made me cut my own switch. Your background, you might have, but I had to cut my own switch. Okay. Like that was part of the punishment. Go out to that shrub
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah,
cut
yeah,
that
yeah.
switch.
Yep.
God, don't get one that won't work, because then I'll get the bigger one. So you pick
Uh-huh.
one so you got to kind of pick your own form of punishment. And so she used the switch. I don't know what I did, but she used the switch on me. Then my mother comes back from work and picks me up from my grandmother's, and she spanks me because my grandmother had used the switch on me. And then I get home, and my father comes home from work, and he whips me because my mother's had to spank me because my so I don't know why that came up when you were talking about the lady that'll just sit there, but the spanking will occur. So, like, the sooner we just get on with it, the better off you'll be.
Yep.
And because it'll just sit and wait on you and keep spanking you until you give in. But
Yeah.
yeah, I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of the way grief is. It'll just take your spanking and get it over with,
Yeah.
you know?
And then you can go play with your friends.
Exactly. Exactly. And have great stories to tell, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. So,
Well, this has been a lot of
but we
fun. I guess we'll let it wrap up. It's been an hour and a half.
Wow, has it
Yeah,
really?
it has.
It didn't
And
feel that way. Savannah, I got to tell you, my oldest daughter's name is Savannah.
oh wow.
Um, yeah. I'll tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed this. You've been a terrific. I've gained insight from you in the conversation I have, truly. And so I just say I really appreciate it, because it didn't feel like an hour and a half.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's been the best conversation I've had all week, podcast wise. So I really appreciate that. I've had a lot of grief people come on lately just by chance. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
The SEO really, I did a couple of episodes about grief, and the SEO really found the managers of people
Yeah.
who specialize in grief.
Yeah.
So it's been a little bit of a heavy week, but I really appreciate this conversation. It's been so much fun. And if you ever want to come on again, I would be more than happy to have you.
I would love to. I mean, let's plan on doing it because um I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I
I feel
really
like we
have.
could easily talk for another hour and a half.
Oh, I definitely think like it would just meander through
Yeah.
things,
That's my
Yeah,
favorite
and
way to
still be
do
interesting,
it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I would
Cool.
appreciate that opportunity too.
Yeah. And then you said your son does things like this. Would he be interested in doing an episode?
I'm sure he would. I'm
Yeah.
sure he would. He is you can check out his work to see if you think it would fit.
I mean,
He would
just from what you've
certainly
already told me, it sounds like it fits. So,
Yeah. Just look him up. It's Bryce, Bryce, Bryce C Travels.com. Uh BryceCTravels.com. But yeah, I think he is when you see him, you will think either homeless or surfer dude. But he is an extremely deep thinker. Like he's one of those people I had to sit with as a child. He would just get upset about something. And I would sit on the corner of his bed. I've sat there for 2 hours before. And like you said about the lady, I'm like, Bryce, I'm not leaving. You know, but what's wrong? I don't know.
oh man,
And
my
I would,
daughter.
for 2 hours, we would just, it was, and I told him, I said, Bryce, I see your thoughts like a, like one of these old ladies who has knitting stuff and all the yarn is just all tangled up, and the problem is like that red string of yarn, and it's like, but we need to pull that one out, like
Uh-huh.
let's just separate that one and talk about it. But it would take hours. And what I realized over time was, we even had him tested and stuff. They're like, no, he's intelligent. He's got, he does not on the spectrum. He doesn't have. What I realized was he's such a deep thinker that things get jumbled.
Uh-huh.
And so you have to kind of give him a chance to unwind things a little bit. But so yeah, if you talk to him, I think you'll find it he is a lot deeper than his appearance. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people these days who, because historically, culturally, we thought the intelligent people, we've been told that the intelligent people are the ones in like the polos and the nice dressed
Oh yeah.
khakis and the
Yeah.
academics and stuff. And then this day and age, the most intelligent, the wisest, the deepest thinkers are the ones who look like hippies that live out of a van.
Yeah, and he is a firm believer that if you want to experience God, you must go to his creation,
Hmm.
not to a building, right? Where man created it. You need to go sit in the desert or in the mountains, or he's been to New Zealand a couple of times and spent months and months and months there. And he's like, you need to sit on this mountaintop and just sit. That's where God is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree completely.
Yeah. But like, yeah, you just wouldn't. I love talking to him. I love talking to him about, deeper things. We get into philosophical arguments from time to time, but you can never question that he hasn't thought about it, like his beliefs. Yeah. I think the world of him.
Awesome. Yeah, look forward to that.
Okay.
But tell people you have a book. You have a book.
Okay. Yeah. It's, overcoming life's toughest setbacks. It's I don't really go into the details of any of some of these things, but I talk about them in the sense of, like I said, these kind of meta phrases that kind of helped me when things would get dark or difficult. I would think about those things and remind myself, like, you know, uh, equations are constant, but variables are constantly changing.
Hmm.
It'll to kind of reset myself back, and and so it's really a book kind of about those 15 things and how I think they generally apply. And not that I would be so arrogant to think that they directly apply to anyone else, but my hope is that by putting them out in the universe, they will apply where they need to, and people will read into them what they need to. Then
Hmm.
maybe it'll be a little spark of hope, or a little ability not to quit.
Hmm. Yeah, if it helps one person, it's done its job.
Even that kind of sounds almost like, but it's true. Like I actually
Okay.
believe, it's just like, it sounds like that. Yeah, 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 okay, it helps one person, but it's true. Like people say, why did you do it? I'm not a writer. I don't like, that's not my gig. You know, I don't even know if it's any good. I just know that I had this urge to take it and say, people would ask me, it's like I had this kind of prompting that you needed to write it down. So I kind of hope it's like, the story of Moses when he's like, but I got to stutter, and God's like, don't worry, I'll work it out. Okay. And so I'm kind of hoping that's the way it works when people read it, is that some part of it will speak to one person at that place that they need to be spoken to.
You know what's kind of lame, if we want to laugh about it, is it did help one person if we consider that one person being you.
You know what? See, I told you, that's another thing I'm going to take. That actually does, though. But see, that one little thing kind of changes my perspective on it, right? See, I actually like that a lot. I'm not kidding. Like I like that a lot because it did actually help me a
Yeah.
lot. It was very cathartic to kind of get it out. And it's
Yeah.
actually prompted me to do some of this where talking about it kind of, not to just talk about it to relive it, but talk about it with a purpose.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah, no,
yeah,
this is
that's great.
therapy.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it is kind of right.
It
Yeah.
is. Content
Yeah.
creation is therapy, and it's a little selfish, but like I don't know, we could talk for another
No, yeah. Yeah,
half.
yeah. We're way over. We're way over. So look, again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I would be more than happy. I would thoroughly enjoy speaking with you again.
Cool. I would like that too. Awesome. Well, we're gonna link all of that down low to your book and your website and everything, so nobody has to look too terribly far for it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Savannah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.